Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Cristian Klein. I'm a senior cloud architect at Elastisys and a researcher at Umeå University, both located in Sweden. I'm passionate about cloud computing and information security. I'm also the architect of Compliant Kubernetes, which is an open source platform to reduce compliance burden at the speed of Kubernetes. Let me first start by highlighting what kind of regulations I'm going to talk about today. When talking about fintech regulations, you might be thinking about anti-money laundering or know your customer. I want to shift your attention to information security, or the so-called CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. For example, GDPR allows you to collect personal data since it's a legal requirement for you. However, it also requires you to treat this data very carefully. In fact, Article 25 requires data protection by design and by default. Even fintech-specific regulations, such as PSD2, include a whole chapter on operational and security risks. In Sweden, for example, the Financial Authority has implemented this directive with a separate regulation, which was amended quite a few times to broaden its scope. Let us look how data protection authorities have enforced GDPR in the financial sector. The screenshot below is taken from the enforcementtracker.com website and shows the top 8 fines applied to entities having bank in their name. You can not only see the amount of the fine applied, but the rightmost column also shows you the reason for the fine. And as you can see, insufficient technical and organizational measures to ensure information security is listed 5 times among the top 8 fines. When it comes to implementing, my experience suggests that there is a huge gap between regulations and technical implementation measures. In fact, my feeling can pretty much be summarized by the experience I once had with a chief risk officer with a legal background that was saying, you need to do access control, and engineers with a computing science background, they were just not understanding what language he was speaking. Like, okay, so what code do I need to write? So what exactly does it mean to comply with information security regulations? The general themes are as follows. Breach notification. You have to be able to detect if breaches to confidentiality are happening or have happened, and depending on its impact, you need to inform your regulators or customers about the breach. Engineers will often call this intrusion detection. When it comes to change management, you need to have a clear process on how code or data changes are introduced. It's not okay to just log into some random server and do some random changes as you please. Often engineers will think in terms of delivery pipeline. This also relates to auditing or transparency, also called monitoring or logging, which records who did what. And here it is very important to highlight that who needs to identify a human and that sharing credential is not okay. Another common aspect is business continuity. You need to ensure that you have enough redundancy so that foreseeable downtime can be avoided. I could go on and talk about all of these for the whole day, but let me summarize the following. Implementing all of these is not rocket science, but it takes a lot of time and effort to do it properly. And in fact, until recently, all of these were seen as an impediment to pushing great new features out quickly and conquering new markets. However, nowadays, there is an increased pressure, will, and also opportunity to be compliant and fast at the same time. Indeed, this is the main takeaway I want to stand today. It is a great decade to work in regulated industries. Cloud computing has realized that it not only has the potential to accelerate startups of the style move fast and break things, it can also become an essential tool in reducing compliance burden in highly regulated industries. In fact, big cloud providers such as AWS, Azure, or Google have ironed out and optimized their processes and tooling to the point where they have acquired various information security certifications. Okay, so does that mean we're kind of done with compliance? Well, of course not. But let me illustrate the benefits as follows. 2 decades ago, you had to worry about physical servers or the physical security of your servers. What locks do I use on my server rack and who has the keys? With a compliant hosting provider, you outsource that concern. 1 decade ago, you had to worry about rotating encryption keys and rolling out your own monitoring stack. Fortunately, if you build on top of the right platform, again, you outsource all of those issues. At the end of the day, all you have to worry about is using the platform correctly, implementing the right controls inside your application, having the right policies entering in place. This is called also the shared responsibility model, or the security of the cloud versus security in the cloud model. In other words, cloud computing reduces your compliance burden so that you can focus your compliance effort where it really makes a difference for your business. Let me illustrate what impact this can have on engineering. I had a customer and the risk department realized that they do not have enough redundancy to meet their business requirement target. So engineers were tasked with adding high availability to their database. Now, without cloud computing, you would have to check that you have 2 data centers that are close enough so that latency is not a concern between them, but far enough so they don't get impacted by the same event, such as a power outage. On top of that, you would have to set some kind of database solution and then set up primary, secondary replication. And finally, you would have to ensure that there is some kind of witness, so a special software that makes sure that you don't end up with having 2 primaries or 2 secondaries, which would pretty much defeat the whole purpose of replication. Now, with cloud computing, you just click on the multi-availability zone option and the cloud provider will make that happen to you. One click and one screenshot later, the risk department was fully satisfied for my customer. Okay, that sounds all nice, but there are several reasons why not all companies can or want to rely on one of the big cloud providers. First, they might need to run a product in Europe. This is a very relevant concern, given that Privacy Shield, the main mechanism that allowed transfers of EU personal data to the US jurisdiction, was ruled invalid in summer 2020. Second, they simply don't want to become locked in and prefer to future-proof their IT, either due to customer demand or as a business continuity strategy. So how can you reduce your compliance burden without locking yourself into any cloud provider? This is pretty much the focus of cloud-native technologies. Let me read you the definition out loud. Cloud-native technologies empower organizations to build and run scalable applications in modern dynamic environments such as public, private, and hybrid clouds. These techniques enable loosely coupled systems that are resilient, manageable, and observable. Combined with robust automation, they allow engineers to make high-impact changes frequently and predictably with minimum toil. I want to focus on a few keywords. First, cloud native does not mean that you need to use AWS or Azure. Rather, it empowers you to run your application both on public cloud providers and on your own service in the basement. Second, the end goal is to allow your developers to make high-impact changes frequently with minimum effort and downtime. The focus of cloud-native technologies is innovation speed. At the heart of the cloud-native ecosystem is the Cloud Native Foundation, or short CNCF, which is part of the Linux Foundation. The CNCF offers a nest for a blossoming ecosystem of vendor-neutral open-source projects on various topics such as container orchestration, databases, matches queue, or storage. There are currently over 1,000 projects, and the CNCF actively reviews them either through end-user surveys or by doing its own evaluation of the technical and organizational maturity of these projects. And of course, the most prominent and the first CNCF project is Kubernetes. So all in all, cloud native and Kubernetes allows you to achieve cloud agnostic compliance. This allows you to build your application on top of a platform that can run seamlessly both under US and EU jurisdiction, and furthermore, avoid vendor lock-in. In fact, you're free to use these technologies on your existing servers, achieve the control you need with the innovation speed you want. As with the shared responsibility model I previously mentioned, just because you use cloud-native project doesn't automatically make you compliant. The devil is in the details. You have to be careful about what projects you choose and how to configure them to implement your policies. This is why in the Compliant Kubernetes project, we have been looking at various regulations, both in financial technology, but also in personal data processing. We mapped out these regulations to controls found in information security standards, such as ISO 27000. For each of these controls, we have found projects in the cloud-native landscape to address them. Combined with a unifying dashboard, Compliant Kubernetes allows you to prove both to yourself and your auditors that you take information security seriously. Compliant Kubernetes is open source. You're free to run it yourself, or you can run it for you in the data centers of one of our trusted partners. To sum up, GDPR and Fintech regulations requiring strict handling of personal data, and failure to do so can result in crippling fines. The end of Privacy Shield raises the barrier for transferring personal data from the EU to the US. Fortunately, cloud-native technologies offer vendor-neutral, open-source building blocks for building cloud-agnostic compliance. Another shout-out, do try out Compliant Kubernetes, and please reach out either via email or via LinkedIn to let us know how we can help address your unique regulatory needs. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you, Cristian. Another presentation with concrete examples. The banks are moving to cloud quite fast and at an accelerating pace. When it comes to moving compliance systems and data to cloud, what is the most common question you get from the banks?
I would say that, so I think that the first and biggest concern is supply management. So it's not okay to just take your existing software stack and move it to a data center. And unfortunately, I have heard quite horror stories with a data center, for example, being, putting the ISO 27000 certification on our website. But then when they actually went on site to check what's happening, they pretty much realized that the data center looked worse than what I have in my basement in my personal home. So the first concern is the supply management. Is this cloud provider actually as serious as they claim? Do they have the right certifications? Then it's also, do they implement those certifications correctly? I mean, ISO 27000 only tells you need to do access control, but it doesn't tell you exactly how to implement. It doesn't tell you exactly whether you should check the ID of your employees or not. So I think that's their primary concern. And then when that concern is being fixed, I think the other ones can be a little bit easier addressed, like, okay, how do I enable redundancy, or how secure is this cloud, and so on.
Good answer. So it's about compliance in that respect.
It's about compliance, right? But a specific flavor of compliance, supplier management.
Right. Good specification. Cristian, many thanks. And anyone further questions to Cristian, please ask in the chat.